So, how does a nice young woman from Benicia, California come to portray one of Hollywood's most iconic roles? We're going to ask that question of our next guest, Riley Krull. Welcome.
Hi.
So, answer the question. You grew up in Benicia, and now you're in San Francisco, and you're going to play the role made famous by Marilyn Monroe and Some Like It Hot and the musical Sugar. What's that like?
It's wonderful. I went to school for musical theater. I went to the Boston Conservatory of Music, and I just graduated last May, and I moved back home. I had a lot of friends who went to New York right away, and it's a very hard city to be in.
Yeah.
And I wanted to spend some time right after I was done with school sort of getting active in the theater world. So I moved back, and one of the first auditions I went to was for 42nd Street Moon, and they're just wonderful. They dig up these old shows that have been forgotten.
Yeah.
And so I auditioned for them, went in a couple different times. I was actually in a couple shows of theirs in the fall, and then in about October they were having auditions for Sugar.
Right.
So they brought me in for that. And it was great. It's a little overwhelming knowing that it's such an iconic part.
Well, and especially this year, I mean, with the film, you know, My Week with Marilyn, and, you know, all the anniversaries.
Yep.
I mean, and that role, you know, I mean, I admit I've seen the movie a gazillion times. Some Like It Hot with Marilyn Monroe has got to be one of the most iconic movie portrayals. And now they've made a musical of it. I bet a lot of people don't even know that Sugar exists. Tell us how that came about.
Well, it was written, I think, in the 60s. It's a Bob Merrill, Julie Stein show. They're the pair who also wrote Showboat. I mean, pardon me, Funny Girl.
Yeah.
And they basically wanted to put this show on as a musical, and when it performed, as my understanding, it was not a very big success.
Yeah, it's not one of those that pops to mind.
And I think you also have to remember, so as much as it's a part that Marilyn was famous for, it's not playing Marilyn.
Yeah.
So that's something that is kind of freeing. So I feel like you have to pay homage to what she does in the film, but you don't have to do exactly the stereotypical Marilyn choices.
Right.
Yeah, so basically it follows the story pretty similarly. Some of the lines are word for word the same because they were written really well. And then there's a lot of great music that was added, and we've actually added some material that was cut from the original production. So Sugar gets to sing a little more, which is great.
Not just the scene with the banjo.
Yeah. And I actually learned...
the ukulele,
I actually learned the ukulele for this show. I'd never played it before. So I only have to play in one song, which is nice. But I learned a few different chords and had some help from YouTube people and from some people in the cast. So it was really fun.
What is it like taking on a role that does have so much baggage on it? Like you said, you know, I'm not playing Marilyn, obviously. But, you know, 42nd Street Moon is known for recreating shows that, you know, a lot of people have forgotten or not even known about.
Right.
There's a lot of pressure.
There is, more so. So the show I was in with them in the fall was Three Sisters, and that was a Kern Hammerstein musical, and that's the same pair that wrote Showboat. And that was a really unknown show. It was from the 20s, and there was a lot of freedom in that. There was no recording of that music. We added a lot of stuff. They got a National Endowment for the Arts grant, actually. And so we had music coming in from people's storage in their garage from England or from the Library of Congress. And that was freeing in the sense that there wasn't a previous recording, so I didn't have to worry about making a choice that was different than that actor made or the same or anything like that. I could just deal with it as I wanted. Well, this, obviously, like you said, the material is very well known. So I will admit I've seen the movie. I think there are certain parts that she makes really wonderful choices. And then I love our director, Diane McBride, was really great about making an environment where we're very aware of the sense of humor that the show is about. It's very broad. Gangsters are gangsters. And, you know, the guys who are playing the women are sort of outlandish.
Right.
And
it's over the top.
Yes. And Sugar is very doe-eyed. But I think she ends up having sort of the heart of the show. She's just sweet and lovable, and I think when you take it on that way, then the pressure kind of eases off, and you can make the choices that make sense for what our show is, rather than just what made sense in the movie.
Right. What is it like, and you know, this is a question for also the producers of 42nd Street Moon, in a time when you've got competition from not only TV, but I mean YouTube and Facebook and the movies, and just, you know, there's a lot of distractions out there. How do you get people not only to go to live theater, live musical theater, but musical theater whose subject matter are plays that actually didn't make it the first time around?
Yeah. Well, they're really lucky. They have a really wonderful following and subscribership. A lot of their patrons are a little bit older, people who know the original shows and know the composers. And then I think they do a really good job of marketing it. They are known in the Bay Area. People understand sort of their mentality of finding these old shows. And then I think when there's so many revivals of shows all the time, you know, a lot of Hairsprays get done, a lot of Chicagos, which are wonderful shows, but it's nice to see something different. So I think we sort of rein people in that way by doing something that they haven't seen maybe ever.
Right. Had you heard about Sugar when you were studying in Boston? Did you know of this show, or was this your first experience of it?
I didn't. This was my first experience of it. When I was looking at their season, they called me in for Three Sisters first, because that was earlier in their season. So they sort of audition as they go. And then I sort of heard about it, and I actually went to the theater and I read a copy of the script. I always like to do that if I can. I feel like you understand the whole arc of the show better, what the characters really like. And then I went and watched the movie, and I sort of said, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to doll myself up. And I went in a little black dress, and I did my hair big, and I sort of was as doe-eyed as I could be, and it went really well. I had a really great time. And like I said, I think they set up an environment where I think they want everyone to do their best in the audition settings, and you want to do your best. And it's fun to work on material that's very different than a lot of the other stuff.
So now you came from Boston here. You completely eschewed New York City. For a young actor, actress, can you make a living in theater in the Bay Area in California? Or eventually you're going to have to go back to the Big Apple?
Eventually I'm going to go to New York. I wanted this to be a good sort of in-between place. For me, I loved Boston. It was wonderful. I have a lot of friends who went to New York City and loved it, and I have some other friends who went, and it's a really hard city to live in.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get your foot in the door, and I didn't want to spend a few years after I graduated not performing. Right. I think you just lose a lot of steam, and a lot of school is about sort of how do you do this, and not necessarily that much application of doing it. Right. And so I was like, okay, this is the time to sort of figure out how I approach a character, and to get better, and a lot of that is just simply doing it. Right. So here there's a lot of opportunities. I'm a member of the Equity Member Candidate Program, which is not quite a member of Equity, and also when you're in New York City, if you're not a member of Actors Equity, it's another step,
it's hard.
sort of harder to get in the door and be seen by people.
Yeah. In our last few moments, you know, talk about why this film, and the musical too, is so beloved of by specifically gay men. I mean, it seems like, I can't tell you how many times I've said with a group of gay men going, that is the funniest, campiest movie ever.
Sure.
I mean, I'm sure there's a heavy audience base in the LGBT community for 42nd Street Moon.
Yes, and I think for this show in particular, it's Maryland, right?
Yeah.
There's men in drag, there's a lot of sort of silliness that happens. But again, I think the story of these two men who, they're sort of in this place where they don't really know what else to do, so they join this band in drag. And I think it's fun that you, as the audience, have more knowledge than the other characters, so you know they're in drag, but nobody else does.
Well, it's interesting, even when the movie came out, I mean, there have been portrayals of men in drag or communities like that that weren't very fun. There was never anything mean about that movie. It was kind of nice. It was ahead of its time.
It really was. And it's funny, I've heard rumors actually it was made in black and white because the makeup that they were doing on the gentleman
would look better.
Was reading better in black and white.
Well, we look forward to seeing it. We've been speaking with Riley Krull, I apologize. We'll hope to see Sugar, and we hope that you'll tune in next week to watch 10%. Good night.